Because of his addiction, Amin has several needle scars on his arm. His young niece Alpha draws lines among the scars with a marker to make it prettier. Amin gives her a ladybug as thanks before falling asleep. Many years later, 13-year-old drunk Alpha gets a stick and poke tattoo at a party. She feels very dizzy after the experience. Her friend Adrian rushes to check on her and she agrees to be taken home. Later, Alpha's mother Tahar isn't happy about her state and immediately gets her daughter in the tub to wash off the party smell. Alpha asks her if she still loves her and Tahar says yes with a lot of frustration. At that moment Alpha throws up. When Tahar takes her clothes off, she finally sees the tattoo on Alpha's arm and freaks out. She asks where she got it and if the needle was clean or shared. Alpha explains it was a random stick at a party, so Tahar quickly starts cleaning the wound. She tells Alpha she'll have a tetanus booster at the hospital tomorrow, but it's too early for testing. When Alpha asks what the testing is for, Tahar leaves the bathroom. That night Alpha overhears Tahar say she can't fight anymore and she's tired of everyone in the family bringing her trouble. Feeling guilty, Alpha grabs a jacket and a bag and climbs out the window. The wind is very strong, so the scaffold outside her building keeps shaking. Alpha struggles to hold on and falls to her knees when she tries to reach the stairs. Fear takes over and she starts screaming for her mother. Tahar soon enters the room and rushes to the window to offer her hand while asking her daughter to keep her eyes on her. Alpha moves very slowly and Tahar quickly pulls her back, so they both fall safely onto Alpha's bed. They cling to each other as Alpha apologizes, and Tahar sings to calm her down. The next day at the hospital, Alpha is too scared to get the vaccine. The doctor lets her do it herself, so Alpha takes the needle and closes her eyes before injecting it. She's surprised to realize that it's only a small prick. The doctor puts a band-aid on her arm and Alpha asks about the test Tahar mentioned, but she'll have to wait 2 weeks for that. Alpha asks what the test is for, so the doctor tells her about a new virus that has been spreading around the world. A flashback shows Tahar working as a doctor. She notices that last night's meals are still in the cart and scolds a nurse for not handing them out. The nurse explains that this isn't her floor and that the rest of the staff left. She's been doing the best she can to help patients, but there's only so much she can do alone. Then Tahar decides to deliver the meals herself. It's revealed that this new virus slowly turns people into marble and causes them to cough up dust. On the last bed in the ward, a man's body has finally completely transformed and he's now dead. Tahar disconnects all the machines and covers the body with a blanket. In the present, Alpha goes to school after the hospital visit and arrives late for her English class. Her tattoo wound keeps itching because it's infected, so she scratches it over the bandage. While discussing today's book, a student starts arguing with the teacher and calls him a slur for being gay. The teacher says they'll talk after class and asks Alpha for her late slip. When she brings it to him, her wound drips blood on his things. The class starts gossiping about this, but the teacher doesn't notice and asks Alpha for her interpretation of the book. He's glad to hear she has some deep things to say, but the moment is interrupted when the other students finally point out that Alpha's tattoo keeps bleeding. The teacher sends her to see the nurse and Alpha grabs her things from her desk, only for the other teens to move away from her. Adrian follows Alpha and they end up smoking in the bathroom. He doesn't understand why the tattoo keeps bleeding, but Alpha dismisses his worries. Suddenly she hears someone whistling and closes the door after throwing away the cigarette, though Adrian doesn't hear anything and thinks she's imagining things. They stare at each other awkwardly and suddenly start kissing. When Adrian's hand touches her naughty place, she stops him and says they won't have their first time in a dirty bathroom. Adrian is embarrassed and turns around to pee. When Alpha gets home, she gets scared because she finds things moved around and a total mess in Tahar's office. Suddenly she hears a noise and follows it to find Amin in her bedroom. She hasn't seen him in years, so she doesn't recognize him and runs to hide in the kitchen. Amin comes looking for her, so Alpha grabs a knife to defend herself, still thinking he's an intruder. He explains he's her uncle and mentions her grandparents' names to prove it. Alpha still doesn't trust him and threatens him with a knife when he tries to take food. Amin tells her about the times he babysat her and took her to the beach, but Alpha still doesn't remember and wonders why his body is shaking so much. A frustrated Amin just takes the knife from her hand and goes to the living room to watch TV. Alpha follows him with the knife again and keeps it pointed at him until Tahar arrives and confirms this man is her brother. Tahar apologizes for not telling Alpha that her uncle would be staying with them, thinking she'd recognize him. She tells Alpha to kiss him hello and she refuses, so Tahar forces her to do so as she reminds her of her manners. Then Alpha complains about Amin sleeping in her bedroom, but Tahar refuses to let him sleep on the couch. She says Alpha can sleep with her, causing her to run out of the room. The siblings laugh at her rebellious attitude. Another flashback shows Tahar coming home from work and finding Amin unconscious on the stairs. She drags him to the apartment and starts doing chest compressions while her mother pours water all over his body. Her mom thinks the red wind is blocking his breathing and pours water on his face, so Tahar pushes her away and calls her out for believing in old tales since the water could drown him. Alpha's cousin soon enters the room to take the old lady away and explains that he got rid of all of Amin's needles earlier, so he must have taken someone else's. After several minutes of chest compressions, Amin finally wakes up. In the present, Alpha is at the hospital waiting to get tested. She's surprised to see her English teacher arrive with his boyfriend, whose body is already half marble. Alpha won't stop staring at him, so the men move to another seat. Since Alpha is still staring, the sick guy asks what her problem is. Alpha says he looks beautiful, making him laugh. The next day at school, Adrian's girlfriend throws the ball too hard at Alpha just to harass her. When Alpha throws the ball back and the girl catches it, the ball leaves a bloodstain on her arm. Alpha realizes she's bleeding again and tries to hide it, but the teacher tells her to take a break and grabs the ball with a towel before throwing it in the trash. Then Alpha asks Adrian if his girlfriend knows about their affair, but he says no. He asks Alpha some questions about her wound, worried that if she's sick, she may have passed it to him. Adrian won't stop bothering her, so Alpha snaps and leaves the class. Later, the family is in the car and Amin tries to connect with Alpha, but she finds him annoying. When they arrive at Tahar's mother's building, they find two addicts on the stairs. Tahar tells them to stay away from her brother and the trio keeps moving while ignoring the needles on the floor. The whole family is at the apartment getting ready for lunch. Alpha's grandmother is an indigenous woman and talks in her native language, so Alpha doesn't understand her. The meal is very lively and at one point Tahar starts singing with her sisters, but Alpha finds them all cringe-worthy. When everyone is distracted, Amin sneaks into the bedroom, but Tahar notices and goes after him. Alpha worries and decides to follow them as well, only to find Amin on the floor because he consumed again and Tahar giving him an injection to keep him alive. When she sees her daughter, she quickly closes the door. Soon the grandmother comes looking for them, so Alpha tells her they're asleep and mustn't be awakened. The old lady makes a gesture on Alpha's face to bless her before hugging her. Another flashback shows a crowd protesting outside the hospital and the guard having trouble keeping them under control. When Tahar comes to see what's going on, the guard explains that the director said they're full so they can't accept any more patients. The crowd grabs Tahar and forces her to look at the people turning into marble. Tahar agrees to compromise by letting the sick people in, but their loved ones must wait outside. In the present, Alpha is in the locker room getting ready for her swimming class, but her classmates have blocked the door and won't let her out. They call her sick and say that she's contagious, but Alpha denies it and licks their faces so she can finally push through. One more girl is waiting, so Alpha spits on her. Afterward, Alpha tries to have fun in the pool, but her classmates keep pushing her underwater to harass her. Alpha tries to fight back and after lots of struggle, she manages to free herself from the other girl's grasp and swims away. Since she keeps looking back to keep an eye out for her harassers, she doesn't see the wall and hits her head on it, causing her to bleed again. The water around her turns red and all the other kids scream as they hurry to get out of the pool. That night Alpha can't sleep because Amin keeps shaking and groaning in pain. She covers him with a blanket and rubs his body to try to help him, but it doesn't work. Alpha says she'll get Tahar, but Amin doesn't let her leave and leans against her, solidly asking for a hug. When Alpha comforts him, he starts to cry and soon she's crying too. Then Alpha goes to Tahar's office and cries herself to sleep there. Sometime later, Tahar is called to the school to discuss Alpha's situation. Before going to the principal's office, she reminds her daughter not to tell anyone about Amin. Tahar tells the principal that bleeding is normal after tests, but he explains that students are afraid of getting infected and parents have been bothering him about it. He wants to see the test results when they're ready and Tahar gets offended, saying everything's fine. She ignores Alpha when she says that they'll kill her if she stays. When it's time for English class, nobody is happy to see their teacher, but Alpha notices he's been crying. He tries to start the class normally, but he ends up having a breakdown, implying his boyfriend is dead. At the hospital, Tahar sees that Alpha's tests are negative. However, she's worried that they may have tested her too soon and wants to do it again, ignoring the other doctor when she says she's overreacting. Alpha comes to the hospital after class and Tahar decides to examine her herself. Alpha starts coughing and feels like she can't breathe as terror takes over her mind, meaning she's having a panic attack. Tahar makes her lie down and tries to keep her calm, only to be startled by something on Alpha's lips. Thankfully, it's only drool, not dust. Then Tahar announces that Alpha will stay in the hospital the whole day for observation. In the evening, Tahar spends her hours studying the new disease. She almost falls asleep, but she keeps herself awake by poking a knife. Her finger ends up with a small wound, which snaps her out of her doze. Then she checks on her family and discovers neither of them can sleep. They're so similar that they move the same way in their beds. Tahar sits next to her daughter and pricks her finger with a needle. Next, she makes their wounds touch, saying that if something happens to Alpha, it must happen to her too. She keeps their fingers pressed and kisses them. In another flashback, Tahar walks through a corridor full of bodies. When she reaches her patients, she stares at all the beds, losing all hope. In the present, Amin tries to exercise but collapses after just a few minutes. When he gets too loud, Alpha reminds him to stay quiet because Tahar is seeing patients in her office. Amin asks why she isn't at school and Alpha claims to be sick before asking him why he's still living with them. She says being a junkie is a choice, not an illness, and thinks he's too scared to self-delete. Amin swears he'd love not being in this room with her right now. A flashback reveals that Amin used to have the mysterious illness. Tahar takes samples of his blood and the rocky formations on his back while he asks to see little Alpha, but Tahar refuses. Suddenly his hard skin starts bleeding, but the blood is red dust. When Tahar tries to take a new sample, the rocky skin crumbles and Amin yells in pain. A horrified Tahar quickly bandages his back to try to keep it in one place, but Amin says it's too late. Back to the present, Tahar checks on Alpha and makes her drink lots of water, to the point that Alpha almost chokes. Amin then starts talking in his mother's language, calling out Tahar for doing the water thing like their mom used to do for the red wind. He doesn't think an atheist doctor following superstitions is a good thing. The siblings begin to argue while Alpha can't understand anything. Amin snaps, saying this only reminds him of the time his own family tried to drown him. Alpha manages to understand the words red demon from Amin, and Tahar threatens to kick him out if he keeps talking about it. A very angry Amin tries to leave on his own accord, but Tahar stops him, wondering why he suddenly cares about his future. Alpha asks her mother why Amin isn't allowed to leave, and Tahar screams at her, saying she's tired of Alpha always getting in trouble too. Alpha angrily tells her to leave her room, so Tahar steps out and locks the door. That night Alpha is awakened by her window breaking as her ceiling starts to come down. Posters and furniture get crushed before the ceiling gets close enough for her to touch. She screams as she tries to push it back to no avail. Then she starts having trouble breathing and her whole body shakes, revealing this is a nightmare she's having during a panic attack. Amin appears next to her to comfort her and gently helps her calm down. Then he opens the window and convinces Alpha to leave with him. Moments later the duo is running through a soccer field, fooling around with the local team. Next they go to a club where Amin lets Alpha smoke and drink. A marbled lady is dancing on top of the bar and Alpha stares at her for a second before joining her uncle on the dance floor. Suddenly Amin's arm becomes stiff in the air and he has to push it down by force. Then his other arm does the same and he has to repeat the process. His body starts squirming and Alpha worries, only to lose sight of him when other dancers get in the way. Alpha immediately goes looking for him and finds him consuming illegal substances in the corridor. A horrified Alpha decides to wait outside until Amin comes out as well. He starts walking very quickly and Alpha tries to understand what's happening to him, but he pushes her and reminds her he isn't her father. Then Amin leaves alone and Alpha doesn't know what to do. Minutes later, Alpha shows up at Adrian's home. After he confirms that his test results were negative too, they start to get naughty. However, in the middle of it, Alpha begins having a panic attack and clings to him. When she looks at his shoulder, she's shocked to see a tattoo that matches hers. She freaks out and demands an explanation, so he says that he got it right after she got hers. He didn't say anything because he was afraid he could be sick from sharing the needle and didn't want his classmates to harass him too. Adrian apologizes for not being more supportive, but Alpha leaves anyway. In a flashback, Tahar is in the middle of her night shift and calls home, but nobody picks up. Then she calls her mother and asks if she's heard from Amin, who was supposed to babysit Alpha. Her mother doesn't approve of Amin being around the child, but Tahar swears he's better now. In the present, Alpha takes the bus and finds Amin. She admits she's scared of being sick and he assures her she isn't, otherwise she would be Rocky by now. Then Amin asks Alpha not to wake him up if he falls asleep. They get off the bus and Amin tells Alpha to wait while he buys something to deal with the effects of what he consumed. Alpha stares at the sea until she hears a noise. She turns around and finds Amin injecting his arm. She panics and runs to the nearest hotel to ask an adult for help. In the flashback, Tahar drives very fast until she makes it to a hotel, where she finds little Alpha sleeping and Amin consuming. She yells at him and slaps him, causing her daughter to cry. She takes her to the bathroom and comforts her before asking her to wait there. Tahar then talks to Amin, unaware that Alpha is spying on them. They start arguing and Amin admits he doesn't want to end up in the hospital like the other people who have the marble disease. He wants to live with Tahar, but she says no because she doesn't want him around Alpha, not to mention she wouldn't be able to invite friends over. Then Amin tries to inject himself with a shaking hand and Tahar helps him to avoid injuries, which causes her to have a breakdown. In the present, Alpha wakes up in the hotel and finds Amin and Tahar in the other bed. She finally remembers the day she wrote on his arm and Amin opens his hand, but there's nothing in it. Alpha holds it as he passes out. Tahar wakes up and freaks out, ready to do CPR on Amin. Alpha tries to stop her and says he asked not to be revived, but Tahar pushes her off and gives Amin an injection. The images of the present mix with what happened in the hotel last time. Alpha apologizes to her uncle for letting her mother wake him up. Another flashback shows Amin completely covered in marble in the hospital. Tahar takes care of him, but he's in too much pain and wishes she'd let himself delete. He asks her not wake him up and breathes one last time before finally dying. Tahar respects his wish and lies down with him as she cries. In the present, Tahar and Alpha are alone in the hotel. It turns out Amin died when Alpha was 5 and she started to hallucinate him after getting the tattoo because he's the manifestation of her fear of ending up like him. Tahar has been playing along and tells Alpha they can bring Amin home, but Alpha says no, finally ready to move on. Relief causes Tahar to cry and Alpha hugs her, saying it's finally over before singing for her. Later in the car, the duo watches the strong wind blow the red dust from the road all over the place. When they finally get home, Amin gets out of the car too and Alpha watches him disintegrate in Tahar's arms, causing her to collapse in grief.